Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap up. So all of the books I read in the month of October. I know this is coming a little late because I'm filming this in the middle of November and I haven't done it yet. I did start filming this video. I started filming it on like the final weekend of October. I had like Saturday morning and I was like, right, let's get something filmed. And then they were literally doing the noisiest construction work outside. And the window cleaners were here, and I live in a block of flats, so when the window cleaners come, they use this machine that like goes up the building, making a ton of noise. And I was like, I had to stop every other word, literally every other word, because it was so noisy. Like the footage I just had to scrap. It was just rubbish. It was awful. So I then was like, well, maybe I'll be able to film it like in the week during my lunch break after work. I then realised that it gets dark at like 4 o'clock now because daylight savings and it's the winter. So no filming after work and lunchtime wasn't going to happen. So here we are, middle of November, finally wrapping up October. Fortunately, you probably have heard a lot of my thoughts on the majority of the books that I read in October if you watched my mini TBR Star Hop TBR game, because that took me so long that it pretty much did take me the majority of October. So a lot of these books have been shown off in that video, which I will link. Diving into it, in October I read a total of 6 books with 1 DNF as well, coming to a total of 2,562 pages. Wasn't great, but it was okay. Would have hoped for more, but we did okay. 3 of the books were fantasy, 2 were romance, and 1 was a sci-fi, and the one that I DNF'd was also a fantasy. 5 of them were adult. One of them is sort of gets categorized in both, so it could be 6 adult, 1 YA. It sort of seems to go between the demographics, so 5 adult, 1 YA, we'll say. 1 was 5 star, 3 were 4 stars, 1 was 3.5 star, 1 was 2 star, and then I also had that DNF. So a variety of ratings. What I did do really well with is my series. So I finished 3 series, I continued in a series, and I DNF'd a series. And I think that puts my on the go at 26. It's hard to think about right now because my spreadsheet is up to date as of middle of November, and I have kept working on a few other things since the end of October, but I think that put it on 26 at the time of finishing the month of October. As for my TBR that I created for October, I was a complete flop. I read 2 out of the 8 books on my TBR, but I did quite well because I did continue in quite a few series, so I'm not going to berate myself for that, but the TBR went a little bit out the window. So let's just dive right in. I don't know why my hands feel really nervous today. They seem to be like, I don't know, they seem to be a little bit nervous. I'll sit on them so that they're not distracting from the video. Okay, so the first book that I read in the month of October was The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. This is set in the same world as her first book, The Spanish Love Deception. And I think I like The Spanish Love Deception more, but I did still like this one. This one I listened to, I think it was a fun romance. I needed something light. At the time I was reading another book, Speaking Bones, which is very long and chunky, and I needed some levity to bring myself back up after that like epicness that I was reading physically. In this one you're following a main character. What's her name? Rosie, maybe? It feels like a very long time ago since I read this book. Rosie and Lucas, were that their names? Anyway, you're following our main character, and she is best friends with the main character from the first book, and at the beginning of the book her apartment has some issues, and so she goes to stay at her friend's place for the night, knowing that her friend is away, and she just lets herself in. She's like, it's fine, I'll just be able to stay here whilst my apartment is getting sorted. Lo and behold, Lucas, who is the best friend's cousin, appears on the doorstep, and he had planned to stay there for a couple of weeks whilst he is visiting New York. And these 2 characters sort of come into contact with each other, not expecting the other person to be there, and it is them becoming friends and then becoming more than friends. And I did really like their dynamic, although some of it felt a little bit forced, that we know that for both of the characters they have not had interactions with the other, but like they've both stalked each other's social medias before, and that they have thought that the other person is attractive. And so you have that sort of like knowledge going into it that they both think of the other person as attractive, having stalked their social medias, as opposed to going in and not having that predisposition or pre-expectations for the other person. And I think I would have preferred that if they hadn't had any expectations about who the other person was going to be. But I mean, I think it was well written. I think it was fun. I was overall happy with the story and where it got to, but I don't think it's going to like sit with me or stay with me for years to come. It's not like an all-time favourite romance. As I have already just briefly mentioned it, I did finish Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. This was a carryover, I think, from September, that I was reading it in September and I hadn't quite finished it. And so I read the final, I can't even remember, 400, 500, 300? I read the final few hundred pages in November, and I mean, I love this series. I do have a whole video, which I will link, where I talk about the Dandelion Dynasty and whether you should read it, and my thoughts overall on the series. I was really happy with the way that this wrapped up, where it ended, where it got to. I was very attached to all of the characters by the time we got to this ending, and I think it was very, very well done. I still think the second book is my favourite in the series, but I do think the second, third and fourth are really, really strong books. And this one I did give 5 stars yet again. I do have faults with it, but like, I think there's faults in every book, and this was still 5 stars. It was still really, really good. I think there were some pacing issues a little bit, that some points you'd be in a battle and then suddenly you'd jump back to like a year before, where they were discovering the technique for how they have succeeded in this battle, and sometimes that would sort of slow the pacing down a little bit. It was always really interesting because I'm like, oh, that's really cool how they did that. But sometimes I felt as though that disrupted the pace a little bit. But overall, like, this book made me cry, this book made me happy, this book made me feel really, really satisfied. I think the ending was really, really satisfying. I was really satisfied with where we got to, where everything came to at the end of this series. So I think that was really well done, that it was tied up in a way that left me feeling satisfied. There was happiness, there was sadness, there was some tears, but like, I was overall sort of satisfied with where we got to. And I think it was a great book in terms of like the different themes that were explored throughout it, that it felt like there was a lot of balance in the book between like heavy topics, lighter topics, the technology, the magic, the battles, the politics. Like, it was all quite, I think, well paced, well balanced. So I would definitely recommend the series. I will leave that video link where I talk about it in depth. Would recommend if you haven't started the series. At the same time as that, I also finished The Return of the King and The Lord of the Rings. Finally, many years in the making, because I did read the first 1.5 books as a child and I never finished The Two Towers, but I can finally say that I've finished The Return of the King. I do want to go back and like rewatch the films now, because I haven't seen them in like 15 years maybe. So I think it'd be really fun now to rewatch the films, having read the book. I did rewatch The Fellowship in March, but I do need to rewatch The Two Towers and The Return of the King now. So I think that might be a nice like thing to do over Christmas. I liked The Return of the King. I think it was a good conclusion to the series. I think Two Towers might be my favourite in this trilogy, because I do feel as though with The Return of the King that it ends, like, you get to what you think of as the ending, and then it just keeps going. And I was talking to Kyle from Read by Kyle, and I was like, well, the ending dragged on a little bit. It just kept going. I was like, we've come to the end of this story now. And he's like, the ending was the best bit, Abby. And I was like, no, the ending dragged. And he's like, no, the ending's the best bit. I've done a collective survey of people in the community, and people like the ending. And I was like, who? I was like, I don't understand. The ending was a drag. I think it's because you get to the point, maybe because I saw the films years ago, and so I have that ending in my head, but you get to the point where you expect the ending to be, and then it just keeps going for like another 100 pages. And I was like, but what if we got to like wrap up? And it just kept wrapping things up for 100 pages. So that would be my critique of it. Part of me feels as though it could have worked better as like not like an epilogue, but like a little novella. Like, you have the ending to the series, and then what we had as the extra ending would have been like a novella, an extra bit. It didn't need to be part of the main trilogy. But I feel as though that might be an unpopular opinion, at least based on what Carla said, because supposedly I'm having an unpopular opinion here. But let me know if you agree with me, if you've read this, or if you don't agree with me. And also, Samwise. Samwise is the best. Samwise is my favourite character. Samwise is like, he is the real hero in this story. That's my main takeaway, is Samwise is the best. The book that I DNF'd this month was Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. This is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, which I read a few years ago. Then I reread it last year to try and continue on, and then I never continued on until this month, where I was like, right, well, it came up in TBR Star Hop that I should read this, and I started reading it, and I was just like, I just do not care. I don't care. I just don't. I really do not care about this anymore. Like, I really liked Serpent and Dove. Like, I really liked that first book. I found that book a lot of fun. I was really invested in it. I really enjoyed it. I liked the characters, but I just don't care enough to continue. So I think I'm going to leave Serpent and Dove as a standalone in my head. It's really not a standalone because it ends on quite a cliffhanger, but it's going to be a standalone, and I am giving up on this. Like, I read the first sort of 60-70 pages of this and I was like, I really don't care about you anymore. I was in this sort of conundrum where I don't care about this series anymore, but I've spent money on this book. And so I feel as though that money is sort of wasted because I'm not even really giving it a try. I mean, I gave it like 60 pages, but I'm not really giving it a try. And I had to remind myself that although I've wasted the money, I don't want to waste my time on it and drag myself through reading this book just because I spent the money on it, that I should just be able to let it go. I don't want to waste time as well as money. So I am DNFing this series and we're just going to leave it at that, but at least that gets another series off of my ongoing series list. I then read 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater, the second book in the Regency Fairy Tales series. These are really cute, light, fun romances set in sort of Regency England, but with fairy tale magic involved. And in this one, we are following a main character, Effie, and she is a housemaid in this, I don't know, noble house. She looks up to and admires the son of the owner of the house, and she thinks that she's in love with him. She thinks that she is. So she ends up making this deal with this fairy called Lord Blackthorn, so that if she sews 10,000 stitches into his favourite waistcoat, he will help him fall in love with her, and their relationship will be able to become a thing. Except lots of things seem to go awry, and it doesn't all go to plan. But I found this so cute. I did. I really liked Effie as a main character and her place in this household. I liked Lord Blackthorn, the fairy. He was very, very endearing, that he'd be trying his best to help and sort a situation and just making things more and more of a mess. So that was really cute and endearing to follow, and seeing how it all developed. I liked the magic that we get that is explored in here, and seeing the different relationships and the friendships in here. And yeah, I found this really fun. I found it quite a lot of fun, and it's a great sort of palette cleanser between more epic books, having these sort of fun Regency fairy tale romances. That I enjoyed a historical romance prior to this, but having these sort of like subgenres where you have like a historical romance with magic is like such a great combination. You're putting like two great things together. I will say that these are quite tame. They're not very explicit in terms of the romance. You don't really see very much, maybe a kiss or like a handhold. So if you're not a fan of more explicit scenes, then these will probably be a good place for you to go if you are after like a fun sort of historical romance. I then finished off another series by reading the Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik, the third book in the Scholomance series. And this one I wasn't so much of a fan of. I think I've had issues with the whole series. Like, the whole series hasn't been a favourite, but I've enjoyed it well enough. Like, I really enjoyed the setting of the Scholomance and our main characters, I would say. But this one, I wasn't so much of a fan of it. I think that's twofold. I think it's because a lot of the setting is away from the school, that it's majority in our real world. So I didn't have that school setting to like ground me, and that setting that I enjoyed, because we're away from it and we're in pretty much our real world. And so that wasn't so enjoyable for me. And then I wasn't so much of a fan of the characters either. So the two things that were compelling me to keep reading this series, and the two things that I liked, I did not like in this book. It fell short. So in terms of the characters, some of the decisions that they were making were really questionable. And the dynamics between the different characters, that I was like, this was not your dynamic that you had in the first two books. So it doesn't seem realistic to me that this is now the way that you are acting together. And the choices that they made, and I was just like, I don't like it. I don't like this choice. I don't like this choice. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you not addressing this? Some things I was like, okay, I can figure that, but then why would you do that again? So there were those things that just didn't seem like they had the same sort of spark or the same dynamic that they had in the previous two books. So yeah, unfortunately, this was a little bit of a disappointment, I'd say. I also thought that this would be quite a quick read, and actually it took me like a week to read it. Like, I don't quite know why, but I wasn't racing through this. I think the only highlight of this was that I was reading this, or I started reading this on the plane back from New York. So I was New York to Heathrow. And it was quite funny because there was a scene in here where they were flying from Heathrow to New York, and I was like, but I'm doing this in the reverse. This is a weird, very, very weird coincidence. So there was that weird coincidence at the beginning in the first 100 or so pages that I was like, oh, this is quite cool. But that might have been my highlight of the book, which is not what you want your highlight of the book to be. And then the final book that I read in the month of October was Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell. It's a standalone, but set in the same world as Winter's Orbit. So in this, you are following two main characters, Tanal and Surit, and Tanal is like this rich socialite that gets conscripted into the army following his misbehaviours. And he is a reader, so he is able to read people's sort of emotions, minds, feelings, and that power is very much looked down upon within the society. That he has to hide this power is one of the reasons why he ends up getting conscripted into the army. And then we are following Surit, who is a lieutenant within the army, and he comes from, I guess, a bit of a troubled past, that his mother was involved in a failed coup. So he has that on his record, and combined with that, he is an architect, and an architect is where you can compel someone to do something that you want them to do. And so it is Tanal and Surit coming together on this mission that they have been tasked with. I really liked those two and their dynamic and seeing them two together. And I think I actually preferred probably the first half of this book, where that relationship was forming, as opposed to the second half, where I think we went more into like the politics of things. I think my critique of this, and at the beginning I was really, really liking it. I was like, this is going to be a really, really solid book. I'm really, really enjoying this. I'm loving the characters. I'm really intrigued by the politics. I'm really just invested in what's going on here. But by the second half, I was like, I really just would prefer if we focused more on the romance and their dynamic, and less so on the politics. And I went in with the expectation that this was going to be more sci-fi politics heavy compared to romance, that I'd been forewarned of that. But I still was like, I just want it to be more on the romance. And things were, everything's heating up, everything's like going, it's getting fast paced with the politics, with the sci-fi, everything's ramping up to the conclusion. I was just like, can we go back to them being cute together? I feel as though Everina Maxwell is focusing on the sci-fi and the politics in her books, and I want her to focus on the romance, because I feel as though she is stronger at writing the romantic scenes as opposed to the sci-fi scenes. Which, I mean, she can do whatever she wants, she's the author, but I just prefer the way that the romance is done. And so I prefer that as the focus. I did have a good time with it, I just feel as though I had a much better time in the first half compared to the second half. So those are the 6 books and the 1 DNF that I read in the month of October. Let me know how your reading month in October went. I mean, it may feel like a little while ago now because it is the middle of November. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!